Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Hope all is well. So, yesterday I have heard some interesting news in regards to that we are now able to experience Sonic Unleashed fully playable on PC through a program that recompiles the game's assets and files and turns it into a proper playable executable on PC. So the game is no longer tied to consoles, which is where it was stuck at for so long. Now, I personally am not a very big Sonic fan. I don't hate it. I don't really care for it. My friend Malik obviously does. I assume this is fantastic news for him. Now, for me personally, what is fantastic news about this is the fact that it is another great step forward for game preservation. Now, I am someone who is of the mindset that we must preserve anything that we have available in terms of media, whether it's movies, music, video games, TV shows, books. If it has been created, it must be preserved. So that way future generations are able to enjoy what we are currently enjoying. Because, right now, I'm 27. 100 years from now, I'll most likely be dead. But people who will be around 100 years from now will be able to experience some of the things that I experienced through the wonders of simply looking at a time machine. Well, not really a time, but simply through the wonders of being able to experience something that was archived. That's a better way to put it. Sometimes I get a little lost. I think before I say when it comes to these types of videos, since this is all just done in one big take. But back to what I was saying before, the idea of Sonic Unleashed getting a recompile program that allows it to be fully playable on PC with little to no real issues. You're able to run it at 16:9 resolution. It looks smooth, crisp, 60 frames per second. It's basically as if the game was fully released on PC, even though it never was. And apparently this software that was used for Sonic Unleashed can also be used for other 360 games in the long run. Now, obviously, this is going to take some time as people, mess around with the program and see how to make other 360 exclusive titles work. Because the Xbox 360, I love the console. It's one of my favorite 7th gen consoles, along with the PS3 and basically the Wii, PS3, and Xbox 360 are one of the best generations, if not the best generations of consoles I've experienced. And it was also the last generation of consoles I've experienced because I didn't bother with the 8th or 9th gen consoles at all because I just stopped giving a shit and went straight to PC. But for the last generation I experienced, I was in love with it. It was amazing. And unfortunately, a lot of those consoles are now reaching, the PS3 came out, 2007? That was almost, in 2 years, the PS3 I think will be 20 years old, unless it's already reached 20 years old. I gotta check when the PS3 came out, but roughly around 07. The Xbox 360 came out around 2005. That console is about to reach its 20th anniversary, if it hasn't already reached its 20th anniversary. And the Wii came out somewhere between, I think, 05, 07. I think it came out in 08. I'm not too sure on when the Wii came out. Somewhere in the late 2000s. And of course, the Wii is also approaching that 20-year anniversary. These are not really new consoles anymore. For someone like me, it still kind of hits like a truck when you think about it. That the consoles that you grew up playing when you were a kid and when you were a teenager are now considered retro gaming systems. A little weird when I do have some of my old consoles here next to me, specifically my old Xbox 360, which still works like a charm. My PS3 is a little dead after I tried modding it, and I think I didn't mod it right, and now the console is pretty much just a paperweight. But, oh yeah, and the Wii is also, out of all these three consoles, here's the thing though about Florida weather. Florida weather kind of kills consoles very quickly because of, heat and humidity over time. And I guess dust as well building up in the systems over time. I was not very good at cleaning out the inside of my consoles. I'm much better at cleaning out the inside of my PC. But these consoles are not meant to last for an eternity. I wish that video game consoles could last an eternity, but the effects of time are something that not only affects us as humans, but also affects our electronics and a lot of the things we use. Which is why a lot of those old pieces of furniture from the 1930s and 1940s are not very pleasant looking now, unless they were perfectly preserved to the point where it's almost like you froze them in liquid nitrogen and kept them like that for so long, and then you thawed them out, and then it looks as good as the day it was just manufactured. Something like that. Obviously, nowadays we also have the technology to mod a lot of these consoles to extend their lifetimes, because there are people, I know some people who love the idea of playing games on the original hardware they were released on, and I fully get that. I love the idea of playing a game on the hardware it was meant to be played on, because nothing beats that feeling of picking up the original controller and playing the original game on the original hardware, the way it was meant to be played when you were younger. It's a massive rush of nostalgia. But I personally have said to myself, as much as I love that, I know that, again, these things are not infinite. But there has to be some kind of way to still be able to experience this 100 years from now. Because a lot of these video game systems that are still working today may not be functioning 10, 20, 30, 50 to 100 years into the future. They may not be working anymore. Because, again, things are not infinite. There are things in this world that are infinite, but electronics are most likely not one of them. So in that case, we have to find alternative ways to be able to enjoy these things. And with that is the whole thing of game preservation. A lot of game developers, a lot of publishers, they make these games, especially with older titles, they made these games, but they never had any idea of actually keeping them preserved for future generations to enjoy. And so nowadays we're kind of feeling the effects of that on certain games. Older titles may not have any sort of source code available that can be used in order to actually play the game on modern hardware. I know that was a big problem for a game like Persona 3, for example. They just didn't have the source code available for it, so they had to remake Persona 3 essentially. Or a game like Saints Row 2, for example, which the source code is available, and there were two devs at Volition that were working on it, but of course Saints Row 2022 happened and the whole series went to shit, and Volition died as a company, and so and one of the two guys who were working on that Saints Row 2 fix for PC sadly passed away, and so there's no one really working on that. It's all pretty sad, honestly, and the fact that the only way that we have available to enjoy that game is through the broken PC port or through emulating the superior console versions, but the only two options you have available are RPCS3 and Xenia emulators. Now, from my experience using both of them, I have a higher preference for RPCS3 just because it's been a much more stable emulator to use. It does take some tinkering and some know-how, and you'll get it to work. But this brings me to my main thing. The fact that I'm still able to play this game in some capacity. And the fact that I'm able to play games that were not even released for PC at all. In the case of the Xbox 360 and the PS3, Call of Duty 3 for me personally is one of those games. Call of Duty 3 was never released on PC. Only way I can enjoy that game is either playing it on the original hardware it was released on, which was PS3, Xbox 360, original Xbox. I think it was also released on PS2. I might be wrong on that. I think it was also released on the Wii. But I know it was released on PS3 and the Xbox 360. At least the better versions of Call of Duty 3. But it was never released on PC. To my knowledge, aside from Big Red 1 and Finest Hour, is one of the few Call of Duties that never saw the light of day on PC. But thanks to the power of emulation, we can enjoy this game. Now, this also brings into question things like the legality of emulating games. And there's people, well, the average gamer is not going to tell you that, oh yeah, like this is not piracy at all because you're playing the game and you got the game. Now, I guess being devil's advocate here, if you do obtain the game in a way where you don't actually, I would say if you own a physical copy of the game, even if you don't know how to rip the ISO file from the disc itself because you don't have the hardware to actually figure out how to do that, and the software and all that. If you at least have a physical copy of the game and you, let's say, download a ROM or an ISO file off a website that hosts ROMs and ISO files for games, I really wouldn't consider something like that piracy, because you do own the game. You're just trying to find a copy of it that's digital in order to be able to put into your emulator. Now, if you don't actually own the game, well, that's another story entirely. But honestly, in this day and age, with the way companies have been with not really giving a shit about preserving their games, or they take, in the case of someone like Nintendo, they take a game that is really old and try and sell it to you for a price that it's not even remotely worth these days. Like when they had that collection of Mario games for the Nintendo Switch, which Super Mario Sunshine was one of them. Super Mario Sunshine is a very old game. Honestly, I think it's already past the 20-year mark. I don't understand why you would still charge for a game like that. You could say, oh, well, we managed to update the control schemes and now it runs better on modern hardware and you could put it in widescreen format and all that amazing shit. That's nice and all, but if I want to enjoy the original game itself, I don't know why exactly a company like Nintendo would get really angry about somebody wanting to emulate a game that was released over 20 years ago. I've always made this argument, and some people might call me, I guess, extreme, or they might call me a weirdo or a crazy man for saying this, but in the case of movies and music and literature, if I recall correctly, once it goes past 100 years for the actual intellectual property rights on that piece of entertainment, then it is thrown into the public domain. So a lot of movies and music and books that were written in 1925 should be hitting the public domain this year. Now, with video games, this is a much more different case, because with a movie, as long as you were able to get some kind of a copy of the film and you've managed to, enhance it over the years, like a film that was recorded in, let's say, 1925, for example. A lot of those films were recorded on old film. So, as the years went by, people have found ways to take old film reels, and then transfer them over in however they can to another type of film reel, and then eventually get it through into a digital copy that can be burned onto a CD, or a fully HD digital copy that's been enhanced or whatever to be put on a Blu-ray, or just simply saved on your hard drive as an MP4 file or whatever type of file that you have available for that. But in the case of something like that, I can understand a movie or music or a book taking so long to be in the public domain, because there are various different ways to be able to experience that. Right now, I can pick up a book that was written in 1919 and still enjoy it today, because books, you don't need anything fancy to read a book. You just need to pick up the book and read it. Or if the entirety of the book was copied over in a digital format, you could just simply read it off the internet. Something like the Bible, for example, holy texts. We are able to read holy texts no matter what platform we decide to read them on. Whether you want to pick up a physical copy of the Bible itself, or you want to read the Bible off of a website. I think there's websites that host the entirety of the Bible. There's apps for iPhone and Android that host the entirety of the Bible. There's various different ways to experience the Bible, to read the Bible. Same thing with movies. There are various different ways for you to watch something like Nosferatu, the original Nosferatu from long ago. There are various different ways you can watch that. Technological advancements over the years are not a hindrance in order to be able to enjoy something that was produced over 100 years ago. There are ways to be able to still enjoy music that was recorded in 1922. Because these are things that technology doesn't change for these things. In order to be able to experience these things, the technology to enjoy these things doesn't change. The ways to consume them don't really change. There is some sort of way that you are able to experience these things so many years into the future. All that matters is that they were preserved. If they were preserved in some capacity, future generations are still able to experience, read, watch, listen to these things. With video games, that's not so much the case, because when a video game is released, it was released for a specific piece of hardware running a specific type of software, and if the game is not being run on that specific piece of hardware with that specific piece of software, it is not going to work very well, if at all. And this is what brings me to say that video games, in my honest opinion, I would say, I don't know if, I guess public domain is the way of describing them, but I feel like video games, once they've reached 20 years, once a video game has reached 20 years of age, I really don't justify companies trying to charge you a cent for the game anymore at that point, because the original hardware and software that those games were released on is most likely obsolete, because technology in the realm of gaming advances quite rapidly. I mean, I'm happy that Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo have at least started caring more about game preservation, because they know audiences, especially older audiences like myself, end up just playing the things that we grew up playing, because a lot of what was available when we were growing up is a lot better than what's available these days for these younger generations. I don't know if that's, the old farts in us speaking. like we're boomers or something, saying, you see, back in my day, we had better whatever than what you have today. You young people don't know how good we had it back then. I feel like that's like what I sound like. Someone my age sounds like when we're talking about how great something like Call of Duty 3 was compared to Black Ops 6, or how great Unreal Tournament 3 was compared to something like Fortnite. That's how we sound. I mean, hell, probably like once we reach 2027 and Fortnite reaches its 10th anniversary, I'm pretty sure there's going to be people saying, oh man, this is back in the good old days of when Fortnite first came out. It's going to happen. But at least the fact of the matter is, with games, there has to be some kind of way to preserve them. And if the companies that make these games don't find a way to preserve them, we, the actual gamers themselves, we the people, have to essentially preserve them. Because I don't have children. Maybe somewhere in the next 10, 15, 20 years, maybe I might have children. Who knows? But even if I don't have children, other people's children will at some point be curious about what it is their parents played for video games when they were younger. And maybe some kid like 20, 30 years from now, their dad, who will be roughly around from my generation, their kid's gonna be like, oh, it's like, Dad, what did you experience back when you were my age for video games? And then Dad, whips out the PS3, if it still works, and then introduces him to the wonderful world of, trying to think of something that's like PS3. I guess Ratchet and Clank Future Tools of Destruction would be a perfect example for a PS3 game, for a PS3 exclusive title. Or pulls out the Xbox 360 and gets the copy of Crackdown working. Show the kid, son, this is Crackdown. This is what we had for entertainment back when I was, young. Honestly, speaking of that, I mean, with the new software made for getting Sonic Unleashed, hopefully it can be used to get Crackdown working right on PC. That would be really nice. I like that game. But no, the thing is that I honestly believe that we need to continue the effort of preserving games, and things like the new Sonic Unleashed recompile software that exists that allows us to not only experience that game but also other Xbox 360 titles over time properly on PC. Things like that put a smile on my face, because it means that what I played 10, 15 years ago, I can still look forward to playing it in the future, because I love emulators, but emulators are not foolproof. Apologies. They're not a foolproof solution to the idea of being able to experience old titles. Maybe for Atari 2600 titles, all you really need is just a basic emulator and you can play an Atari 2600 game. I can play the games that were around back when my parents were younger. I can enjoy those games today. And I've played Atari 2600 games. They're not ultra exciting games, but it is nice to be able to experience something that kids in the early 80s were enjoying and they considered the peak of video games, the peak of entertainment, peak of graphics and sound effects and video effects and all that cool shit. The flashing lights on screen and the pixelated sounds and art on screen. The fact that I can experience that as someone who was born in the late 90s, never grew up in the Atari 2600 or NES or Super Nintendo days, someone who was around right when the N64 was considered new hardware, the fact that I can experience those older games is great, and I would love for future generations to be able to experience something like Halo 3, or something like Call of Duty 2, or something like the very first Ratchet and Clank, or being able to experience the Spider-Man 2 movie game on the original Xbox. But again, companies like Nintendo who argue that emulation is piracy and that it's bad, I can't honestly say that all of it is, like, if emulation at its core is not piracy, I do not consider it piracy. I do not consider it something illegal, because at the end of the day, emulation isn't giving you access to the software. Specifically, it's not giving you access to the ROMs and ISO. You have to provide those on your own. What emulation just does is it provides a platform where you can take those ISO and ROM files, you can take those ROM files, dump them into this emulator, and the emulator will essentially make the ROM think that it's being run on the original hardware. So you could experience it on a much more highly advanced gaming PC running, I don't know, like an RTX 4090 or something. You can experience it like that. You can, crank up visual settings, audio settings, anything to far beyond the capabilities of what the original hardware was able to do. But again, I don't consider emulation illegal. I will never understand why game publishers and game developers try to continue this idiotic fight, sending lawyers and shit, when even they know emulation is a godsend for their products. It will get people to know their products, their old content, their old games. We're not just simply locked into the new stuff. And even with the new stuff, if we want to experience the new stuff 10, 20 years into the future, we have to have some sort of way to be able to access it. Even if the hardware, which is not eternal, dies out, we have some kind of alternative method to enjoy the games, these games. Just like with movies and music and books, there are various different ways to enjoy those things into the future. With gaming, not so much, so we have to find ways in order to still be able to enjoy games that were released on the PS2 in 2025, because the average PS2 may be on its last legs, or it's been Frankenstein to hell in order to work properly these days. If you just use an emulator, it makes things a lot easier for people like me. And it's one of the greatest things about modern day gaming. The fact that you can experience a myriad of games that were released years ago. In fact, there's still a lot of games that haven't been fully preserved yet that have been lost to time. Because again, preservation wasn't a big deal, and now that it is a big deal, companies want to try and nickel and dime you because they want to make sure that if you're going to be experiencing our retro game, we still want to, milk as much money out of you as possible. The game came out in 1989, but that's not going to stop us from trying to charge you $10 to $15 for a game released in the late 80s. Which, again, it's absolutely retarded, honestly. I don't know why you would still want to charge money for something that was so old. But again, I get it. Gaming companies, corporations just want to nickel and dime you for all they can. They don't really give a shit if you're able to experience the product. They just want to make sure that they were able to get, some kind of money off of you, even no matter how old the product or service is. And if they're not actually making it available to play at all, at least in the case of reselling a game that was released 20, 30 years ago, I guess the only upside is they're giving you some kind of legitimate way to obtain it. But if it's the case of a game that is not even available to purchase, then what do you do in that case? You have no other choice but to emulate. Or in the case of a really old PC game that's considered abandonware, you have no other choice but to pirate it. A game like Area 51, for example, I know some people might feel pretty old by me bringing up Area 51, the video game. For those of you unfamiliar with it, it's a first-person shooter where you go to Area 51 and shoot aliens who are doing evil alien things. That game is a PS2 and original Xbox game, and there is a PC port of it as well, but the PC port, due to I think, if I remember correctly, the developer and the publisher no longer existing, or some kind of legal thing with the rights owners of the game, no one really owns the rights to the game, and so the game essentially become abandonware, because if nobody owns the rights to it, they can't really put it on Steam, they can't put it on GOG, they can't put it on Epic, so really the only option is it's just there. But if you can't get the game, the only way you can just get the game is download it from the My Abandonware website, which is the website that hosts a lot of these old abandonware games. And a lot of these games are the raw game itself. Like, even if it's an MS-DOS game, they will host it on that site. Area 51, at least, the whole game is available on that site for free. Because, again, if nobody owns the rights to the game and you can't buy it anywhere, this really is the only option for you. So, it's one of those things where I've always said to myself, people say, oh, are you advocating for piracy? Are you... Honestly, in the realm of gaming, there really is no other option. And if I remember correctly, as Gabe Newell said, it's not an issue of price, it's an issue of service. If I don't have the ability to experience a game anymore because of the hardware not existing anymore, or the game's not available for sale, I'm gonna have to pirate the game just so I can experience the game. Price is not really that big of a concern. In fact, over the years, I remember when I was younger, I used to pirate a lot of PC games because, again, I was younger, I didn't have my own income, so I wanted to play a game like Fallout 3, for example, on my PC. What did I have to do? I had to pirate the game when I was a teenager. That was the easiest way for me to get my hands on a lot of games, especially a lot of older PC titles. Nowadays, since I'm older, I have my own income, I have my own, proper gaming PC setup and everything. I'm obviously not gonna really pirate a game, a video game these days for the PC, because I could just buy it. Also, it brings me a lot more, a higher peace of mind, knowing that what I downloaded and installed and the exe I ran is not going to infect my PC with God knows what, because a lot of those pirated games may come with that not so good bonus. It's one of those things where I don't hate piracy. In fact, I actually love piracy in the case of something like being able to watch anime. But in the case of gaming, I love the concept of you being able to get any game you want for free and cracking it and all that. But obviously, as someone who's been on the internet for so long, there is the whole thing gnawing at the back of my head where I'm like, well, if I install this pirated game and I run this exe for this pirated game, even if it's cracked, who's to say that the game doesn't contain a Trojan? And, Trojan is not something you want to be hearing on when you're on the computer, unless you've stumbled across an ad for Trojan condoms, and that's a completely different story. But it's not something you want to hear your PC telling you that it's encountered, because boy, are you fucked. You're gonna have to do a whole system restore and all that. It's a pain in the ass. But you don't want to experience that. That's one of the things that I don't take a risk of myself with modern pirated games, because I just don't know what I'm installing and what I'm running when I run the exe file. Man, my throat is getting clogged up. I need some water. This ramble has gone on way longer than I thought it would. Holy shit. But no, with pirating games, maybe when I was younger and I was a bit more careless on the internet, I obviously didn't really care what I was installing and running, because I just assumed, well, just install and run it, and that's probably why my old laptop kind of ran like ass near the end of its lifespan. But with my current PC, I ain't doing that. I ain't doing that shit, dude. But I am willing to still emulate games. And even if I don't fully own the game, I'm not gonna. That's one thing. I'm not gonna tell y'all where to get them for things like ROMs. I'm assuming most people watching this and agreeing with me on a lot of what I said earlier already know where to find ROMs. And if you don't know where to find ROMs, quick Google search. I mean, come on, folks. You know how to use Google. You know how to navigate. Use your resources. Scour the internet and find the ROM sites that you're looking for. I'm not going to tell you them because I'm assuming for legal reasons, and also because I don't want those sites to be taken down, because that screws me over in the end. But with ROMs, much more different case than actual EXEs for PC games. But ROMs for emulators, still something I'm willing to actually download and use in my emulators. But again, it's one of those things where I'm like, piracy, I love it. I've been pirating for years. And honestly, it's one of those things where most people have probably said to themselves, yeah, it's essentially considered a crime, but at the end of the day, everybody you know, everybody who you've spoken to has probably experienced pirated content or has pirated content at some point in their lives. It is something that is inescapable for the entertainment industry. We pirate things because we want to be able to experience said thing, and honestly, there are loads of different ways to experience pirated content available. And if one gets knocked down, like a Hydra, 2 to 3 more will take its place. It's one of those things that it's like Pandora's box. Once piracy has been unleashed, you can't really seal it up and put it away. As long as there's always an entertainment industry, there will always be piracy. But in the concept of preserving video games, piracy is one of those things that, in a sense, does help game preservation. And in a sense, I guess in that case, it's one of those things that helps fuel this whole notion of, yeah, we should probably be preserving games too. It is art. It is just like movies and TV shows and books and music. It's something that has to be preserved because we need to be able to enjoy these things years into the future. If we can't enjoy them, then it's going to get lost to time, and future generations won't be able to experience it. And things like piracy have made the concept of preservation of media much more possible and much more feasible, and made it much more easier for future generations to access. So, don't really know where I was going with this whole ramble, but the point I'm saying is, I think media preservation is necessary. We need to continue advocating for it because we as humans are not immortal. Our hardware, our electronics, they're not immortal. The actual media itself, the entertainment, the piece of media or entertainment itself, the games, the movies, those things may actually be eternal if we preserve them well and find ways to be able to still enjoy that media. Despite years of technological innovations and changes and all that, there has to be some sort of way to still be able to experience these things. And in the case of gaming, with it being one of the newer forms of media, even though gaming's been around since, I would say, the 1970s, but it is still a sort of younger form of media compared to more traditional forms of media, like, again, print or film. It's one of those things where we never thought about it all these years, but now that a lot of people like myself are bringing it up, now there's more of an actual reason to get into the whole idea of game preservation, so we can continue to enjoy these things years on into the future. And if piracy is one of those ways that helps us preserve games, like in the same way it helps us preserve movies and music, then it's one of those things that it's one of those things that we essentially have to use. Because if the companies that make these things no longer exist, or they're not willing to preserve these types of media, then we, the gamers, we, the consumer, we, the audiences, have to take it upon ourselves by whatever means necessary to be able to successfully preserve these things. And it's one of those things that makes you think, and it's one of those things where I would say, out of topics that I discuss, there's things that I get passionate about. This is one of the ones that I get even more passionate about, because again, it's crazy if we lose a lot of these things, and I don't want to lose media. Anything that ever becomes lost media or just becomes permanently lost media because nobody bothered to preserve it, it makes me sad that I'll never be able to experience or even see something that somebody long ago was actually able to see or experience. And again, it's sad. Somebody put the work and effort into making these things, and they had a vision, they had a message or whatever, and they wanted people to experience it. But if it was lost to time, nobody will be able to experience it again. We should never allow any form of art or media to ever die out. We should always preserve it for the future generations. Anyways, that's today's ramble. I've gone on for longer than I have in previous rambles, but y'all seem to really like the ramble vids. At least from previous ramble vids, I've noticed we've been doing really well. We've gotten up to past 250 on 2 of my ramble vids. One about violence and sex and gaming, and the ramble I did on the whole Overwatch Marvel Rivals thing. I think I mentioned this in my previous video, but I thank y'all who watched it, and I thank y'all who commented and liked the video. It really helps me out a lot. It gives me more motivation to keep going and doing these, because if y'all like hearing me just talk for this lengthy period of time, then I'll go ahead and keep doing this. And yes, Malik and Jimmy, especially you, Jimmy, because I'm pretty sure that you're probably watching this and you've made it this far into the video, Jim. I am definitely still working on episode 4. It's 2/3 of the way done. That takes a while to do. A video like that, that's almost 30 minutes long, and it's not just a one-take me ramble about whatever. A video like that takes some time to make, and I'm almost done. I should hopefully have that out by this coming weekend, which should be the weekend of, hold on a minute, March 8th, March 9th. So around that weekend is when you should be expecting me to have that fully done. I don't know if it'll be uploaded by the weekend, but it will be done by this month of March, which is when I'm currently recording this video. Anyways, I've gone on longer than I expected. I'd like to thank y'all for listening to me today ramble on. Again, please comment, subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. I didn't upload anything to my Twitch this week. This past weekend, might do it this weekend. I've just been busy and just tired. So with this video, these videos at least help me get content out there and get me, it's like a neat little hobby thing I like doing. And if you guys enjoy it, and your comments and your likes and your subscriptions definitely tell me that you like it, so please if you want to support this, then again, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow the Twitch, please, because we are trying to reach 50 followers on Twitch, because again, me, Malik, Jimmy, and I will sing Controlla as a celebration of 50 followers on my channel, Corn Golden. You heard me right? 50. If we can get there, amazing. We're almost at 50 subscribers on the YouTube channel. I might do something to celebrate 50 subscribers, because I have never made it to 50 before. Hell, I've never made it to 250 views on a video before. So I'm truly thankful for that, and honestly, all this wouldn't have been possible without y'all showing me that support. So thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day or evening, depending on what time you watch this. Peace.